morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I am Josh, that is Jason, and that is CS down below. This is the Redpill Project's Daily Dose, live with you Monday through Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. This is where we talk about, well, everything geopolitical, geoeconomic, what's happening in the world, mixed in with a little bit of conspiracy, and I guess everything else on top, right? And so tonight we are joined with our guest, CS, the centrist servant. He is a police officer somewhere in the United States. He chose to remain anonymous, and we completely respect that. He has out there a manifesto, and one of our listeners out there, Tim, had got a hold of it, and Tim sent it over to me, and we talked, and I said, well, you just need to come on the show, and you need to talk to us. So we're going to have an interesting discussion tonight, everything from kind of what's happening now at the border, what's going on, the color revolution that's being sparked by people like George Soros. CS, how you doing tonight?
Very well. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So tell us a little bit about you as much as you can without obviously revealing too much. And what got you to write this manifesto? And for those that are wondering, it's at thecentristservant.com. It's linked up in the description box. You can find it there, and there's a downloadable PDF there, so you guys can go ahead and read this manifesto. But go on, take it away, my friend.
Well, I've, in one form or fashion, I've been in law enforcement for almost 20 years now. My most recent involvement is with a specific police department somewhere in the United States. Obviously, I can't disclose which police department, but I will say it's obviously for a mid to large size metropolitan police force. And so with that, I experienced many of the protests, many of the riots associated with George Floyd and actually our own homegrown issues that obviously I wouldn't be able to disclose because that would betray my anonymity. And just watching the fallout of what was going on, the rapidity of it, the shock of it, how far and how fast this all devolved is kind of what led me to undertake this. And one day I was listening to a podcast, I've obviously listened to many of them. And one really just kind of stood out to me. And I just had something of an epiphany, which I speak about in this manifesto, where I just felt like I had to do something because I just felt like not enough people were going to. And that time was of the essence. And if not me, then who? And if not now, then when?
Very true. And so I'm curious, what was your stance and perspective before all of that happened?
In regards to what?
The worldview, what was happening in America. I mean, at this point in time, prior to this happened, obviously 2018 time frame, we have Trump in office, obviously defeated Hillary in a very large upset. The economy's doing great. Things are happening. We see Trump being suppressed in the media. We see politicians attacking him. They've already got the first impeachment proceedings kind of already in the wind and started. What was your kind of geopolitical stance at that point in time prior to the riots coming about?
Well, at the time that I started with this department, which, to be honest, really isn't that long. Like I said, I've been in various forms of law enforcement prior to this, but with this particular department, I haven't been in that long. And just from that short period of time, I've seen immense changes, which obviously in retrospect, I can look back and say there were several events that kind of ratcheted things up, right? And that was one being the proliferation of Black Lives Matter, the other Antifa, the other being Trump's elected into office, COVID, and then George Floyd. Okay. And each one kind of culminated into a tighter and tighter constraint on the U.S. police officer.
Now, did you feel prior to the riots that there was obviously like this noose being held on the law enforcement community, that because we had the similar events happen 2014 time frame, I believe in Missouri, right? And really nothing was ever done, I believe, to mitigate that type of stuff. So, coming into 2018, 2019, 2020, prior to the George Floyd incident, right? What was the kind of perspective, the mental perspective of the police officer? Do you see the United States going down the wrong way? Do you see the cities headed more radical left and more liberalism being promulgated within the police force, and the upper leadership turning that way and turning a blind eye? Kind of like rules of engagement in Afghanistan, where you're told to stand down unless it's a life and death situation.
What you summarized right there is honestly an understatement to how far and how fast it fell, and to the degree to which there is a collusion and a capitulation nationwide. This is so. Believe me when I say, if I speak for my department, it's basically speaking for most departments, at least to the size of my department. I'm certain it's almost unanimous across the board. Right now, our word means almost nothing. We are wired up like a Christmas tree with all kinds of audio, video. It really stands kind of as a testament to how little that anyone trusts us or believes us. And the irony, of course, is, there's never been lower numbers of, police misconduct and things like that. The problem is, ever since the advent of, the cell phone and, obviously the increase of technology, these kinds of shocking things, which are, by the way, extreme outliers, nobody's going to film or care about the 900,000 police calls for service that don't result in anything controversial whatsoever. They care about that one time that it was captured. And I mean, everything kind of ties into everything else, right? So the media has an incentive, right? Print media, cable, they're dying. They're dying slow, painful deaths, and they know it. So their whole goal is to rage bait. Mm-hmm. And the best way to rage bait is to keep people perpetually pissed off, feed them a bunch of lies or massive exaggerations at least, and to spin everybody up, because that's the only way to keep viewership. So actually in my manifesto, and I had to kind of belabor the point many times, because I figured some people would be reading it and they'd be like, well, what the hell does this have to do with policing? Right. But I try to tie it all together in where I believe, things kind of started to go haywire, some historical context to offer to the viewer / listener why we're seeing what we're seeing. It's not just a matter of what we're seeing, it's why are we seeing it and why now?
Well, so what is
yeah.
Okay, so
yeah,
go ahead.
Can I go, Josh?
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
So one, I want to say thank you. I have friends that are state troopers. I have friends that are county sheriffs, and I know people I'm from the Rochester area, so the Rochester Police Department. Some of them are my clients because I'm in the contracting business. So one, thank you, and ultimately, the thing I'm hearing from this is, from everything you're saying, and the question that I'm asking is, who benefits? Who benefits from a titillating story about, this one lone guy that got beat up by cops, right? Who benefits? Is it the government that benefits? Is it the networks that benefit? Is it the reporter that benefits? Or is it all of them, right? I think
it really is. And funnily enough, I have a chapter. I don't even know if you would call them chapters, a subchapter called Qui Bono, which is, of course, the Latin phrase for who benefits. And honestly, what we're seeing now, it goes obviously very, very deep, right? Russia has incredible incentive to destabilize NATO. China is actively seeking to destabilize us. And of course, our own media in various political interests, both international and national, they all have some hand in it in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. So with those factions kind of all having a hand in it, or all having a piece of it, is there some type of center point? Is there a center point of failure for whatever this is that's producing it? Because what we've seen and what we've noticed, and I've been doing this kind of thing for a very long time and looking at all this stuff, pre 9/11 thing, and you see it on the local level. You saw it very much so on the local level. Very similar to how Venezuela had their color revolution happen, is they destabilized in local neighborhoods and local communities over short periods of time. Then they introduced drugs and removed the policing or make it incredibly difficult to police. This produces massive instability. You had the whole political structures on those local levels collapse, and then this causes major problems and a collapse of the larger political structure as well as the economic structure. And so we started seeing this early on in the United States, probably I would say Bill Clinton, 92, is that early. And we started seeing a lot of these policies being implemented. I mean, the 1993 Crimes Act that Joe Biden helped put on the table was one of them. So what's your perspective on that in the sense of how it's been organized at the local level and implemented?
Well, now more than ever, I think the adversary, and I'll just say the adversary. I don't necessarily need to malign anyone, or specific or denigrate anyone, but there are powerful special interests. It's just a fact that they figured out, and forever misguided and honestly disgusting it is. It's actually very brilliant strategically what the goal is. And as a matter of fact, recently I've been in addition to what I've already done, I'm planning on doing something similar as you're doing. I'm going to start a blog, and I've already started writing the first piece, which focuses around the Justice and Public Safety PAC. PAC obviously being a political action committee. If you look into the records, and right, the FEC or the Federal Election Commission, they keep records of all this stuff. And the largest donor, hands down, in every single city, to get new district attorneys is George Soros. And, when you say George Soros, right, most people kind of roll their eyes, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're one of those people. You're a conspiracy theorist. The problem is it's very prominent. And that's a good way for, we'll say, the adversary to kind of denude the argument, right? To delegitimize it. Oh, well, you're a crackpot. Problem is, for them, it's very factual. And if you do just a little bit of digging, it doesn't take much.
Nope.
Just a little bit of digging. You don't need to go to the deep web, the dark web, none of that. It's all there, and it's very clear. And so one of his goals, obviously, is to destabilize. And the best way to do it is not necessarily on a national level, but on the local level, just as you said, Josh. And recently, these are just a list of the district attorneys that have been essentially installed. You have Larry Krasner of Bucks County or Philly, Kim Fox of Chicago, Joe Gonzalez, San Antonio, Aramis Ayala, Orlando, Parisa Degani Tofty, Arlington, Virginia, or the Metro DC area, Jake Lilly, Denver, Colorado, Jose Garza, Austin, Texas, Jim Kamoke, Fort Lauderdale, Kim Ogg, Houston, Texas. It goes on and on. Let me just name off just a couple more. Kim Gardner, St. Louis, Raul Torres, Bernalillo County or Albuquerque, Mike Schmidt, Portland, and probably the biggest loon bat of them all, Chesa Bowden of San Francisco County.
So these aren't small cities.
Yeah.
And so that's the interesting thing is this is kind of what we're hinting towards is that this has been progressive for well over a 30-year period.
That's right.
Of strategic placement. And that's, one of the friends of the show, Michael Tessarian, he said it best. He goes, these people have one agenda and they will stop at nothing to implement it. They've been at it for thousands and thousands of years and they'll continue to do it until they win.
Yeah.
And so there's another one on that list, and we were just kind of talking about it a little bit ago, and I actually got the article pulled up right here. Let me pull this up real quick. You're not going to be able to see it on your side, but Soros-backed LA District Attorney to downgrade hardcore gang unit. Controversial left-wing Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gason is reportedly planning to severely downsize or outright dissolve the office's hardcore gang unit. I mean, how detrimental is that to like a county like LA, which probably has the highest rate of gang crime, probably one of the top 5 in the country?
Yep.
And he wants to basically get rid of the whole unit responsible for mitigating that level of crime.
Well, it's obviously catastrophic. And one of the things, so there's a couple of different ways that this, quote unquote, reimagine policing is done. Of course, it sounds, very, very PC, very, flower power-ish, but beneath that is a very hardcore, radicalized leftist agenda at the very backbone of this thing. And obviously, some of the ways is demoralization, right? They're going to go after you financially, right? If they can't go after you financially, at least not yet, they're going to, and that includes like retirement systems, your benefits, and then obviously demoralizing by purposely either disbanding units, as you just shared, or choosing willfully and deliberately not to try certain cases, right? So what does that do? So what does that do for the police officer? Okay, so I have this thing. Let's say it's a narcotics arrest, and the district attorney of whatever county decides, I don't want to. This isn't going to trial. Basically, release him or her, and demoralizes it because now. So what am I doing? We're risking our lives so that nobody's going to get convicted, and so it makes them think, well, why am I even doing it at all? Why risk it, right? And I think, honestly, that's part of the plan, too. So we're obviously seeing police officers leaving in droves. Departments all over the nation are hemorrhaging bodies right now. Yep. And that's also part of the plan, right? Some places aren't even filling new recruits. And, the problem with these people, with these district attorneys, with these city halls, city council members is what they seem to forget, though, is they have a moral, not just a moral obligation, but a legal obligation to provide adequate public safety. And ever since these protests/riots started, there's multiple lawsuits around the nation saying, for what happened to them, saying, you endangered me, you endangered my family because you purposely and deliberately tried to make police a political statement. And I suffered some kind of, horrific, pick whatever it is, carjacking, somebody gets murdered. And that's what we're seeing. So I don't know. I would just tell the public I think that's kind of the number one way to kind of tip this back, at least a little bit, is to take these people to court and say, you have a legal responsibility to ensure public safety, and you have not met that obligation.
Well,
and you chose to turn it to politics.
And if what's happening with Andrew Cuomo is an example, it shows these low-level leftists, ideological leftists, that they mean nothing. They're expendable, and they need to recognize that, and not in a angry, mad way. But they will throw them under the bus in a heartbeat and put someone else in place. And we've seen this all throughout the country. And so, it's a warning to all those people. really, that these people do not care about you. And maybe it's because they work on blackmail or some other methodology, but I urge people to vote, or not to vote, but to go out and run for the local offices, run for your city council, run for your school board. Mm-hmm. This is where we need the majority of the people who have a moderate or conservative viewpoint. And I don't like putting the labels out there too, because I mean, as conservative as I am, you know, I am in the middle of the line about some things. I do have some things that are, you know, I guess liberal in that perspective, but the ideological aspect of it, I am not. I do not hang on to that belief system as an ideology. I do not force it upon others. I do not say that you have to obey by this rule that I created because my little group thinks it's cool and we want it to be true. And that's the sickness that's happening right now in the United States. And it's leaking. Not leaking. It's pouring into our societal structure, the foundation, the fabric of America. And that's a scary thing because it overwrites history. We have our history, our culture being changed underneath our feet. We did an episode last week about 2 weeks ago about the cancel culture and how they're removing, you know, Aunt Jemima, they're moving Uncle Ben and all these minority characters from the shelves in the grocery store.
Dr. Seuss.
Don't these people understand it? They're not removing Mr. Quaker. They're not removing any of the white people. They're moving all the minorities, and the minorities are calling for the removal of it because it's hateful, but they're ruining their own culture. They're ruining their own history because they're so brainwashed and manipulated because they don't understand how information works, how information warfare is happening right now with this damn thing that you hold in your hand or this thing that you peer into, and that people need to criticize, hypercritically analyze all information that comes in and ask, does this information have an agenda? Is it trying to manipulate me in one fashion or another? Or is this information pure and truthful and I can judge it based upon that? And that's the biggest problem right now with people, is they're so blindly ignorant to what's happening around them that they just let it happen and think that it's not their problem. It's like this narcissistic illness that's plagued humanity because of social media.
That's absolutely right. And you know, Yuri Bezmenov, are you familiar with Yuri?
Very familiar with Yuri.
I think probably most of your viewers are too. So I won't go too in depth about Yuri, but you know, one of the things he said is, you know, these people ushering in the revolution, they're useful idiots for the ones who are really in power. Exactly. And eventually they're all going to be lined up and shot in the head just like everybody else. Look, you can't appease a mobocracy, okay? You're going to get strung up like Mussolini one way or another. Mm-hmm. And that's what these people that have either unwittingly or knowingly you know, kind of foisted with this cancel culture nonsense. Like you can only, you know, eventually the crocodile is going to eat you, right? It may eat you last, but in the end, it's going to eat you. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing. The left is kind of eating its own. And so, you know, one of the reasons why I wanted to call myself centrist, right? There's, you know, two reasons. Obviously, servant. You know, as a police officer, you are a servant to the people, right? And that's what you're supposed to be, that you took an oath to do that, serve the people. And then centrist, you know, obviously I've mostly, you know, voted Republican, but that isn't to say that I don't have very centrist views. You know, I have very, I don't want to say left leaning, but yeah, I mean, center left ideas about
so do I.
Certain things. And I'm also seeing a lot of people that, you know, were on the left. They're seeing what's happening and they're defecting in droves. So let's embrace them. Let's not, you know, shun them. Like Tim Pool. Tim Pool, you know, he's called, you know, alt-right or whatever. Tim Pool was always a leftist. Sam Harris has always been on the left, you know, obviously not the extreme left. What's her name? Tulsi Gabbard. She's not completely insane, you know, like Kamala Harris, you know, and she whipped the shit out of Kamala Harris on the stage. And what happened to her? Well, she was basically executed and was not allowed to, she was not allowed to go back onto the next
Her
electoral.
party basically told her to fuck off.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And the DNC machine, that's what they do. And I mean, how much more evidence do you need of the corruption? I mean, aren't they
Bernie,
sick?
right? Bernie probably would be, and look, I am not a Bernie supporter. I think Bernie is kind of like a put in place deep stater. What I mean is the deep state put him into place a long time ago and he's just kind of a puppet. But shit, I mean, Kamala is more radical than Bernie and it's scary.
By far. As you say, I am not a Bernie supporter. I'm not a socialist. I'm not a democratic socialist, whatever he wants to call himself. He's got some pretty loony ideas, but I do sense something genuine there, as opposed to a Kamala Harris. He's kind of like a Ron Paul, right? In the sense that what you see is what you get. If what he's saying, he actually believes that. He's not shilling for anything or anybody. That's what he believes. Kamala Harris, and to kind of go back to the point about the district attorney and how much power they actually have, that was her last job in
LA.
In Oakland.
Or Oakland, yeah.
And look where she ascended to, and it just goes to show, if you have that political will,
if you have a big mouth
and a very big mouth
and a soft tongue,
and you're willing to lie constantly. Eric, remember during the debates, one of the big talking points against Joe Biden was, the busing, and you put me on that bus, Joe. And all of a sudden she gets picked as his VP. Mm-hmm. And of course she was questioned about that. And what did she say in defense? It was a debate. It was a debate. So you're a piece of shit. So you're a piece of shit and you have no laurels. Is that what you're saying? Is that better? That's actually worse. And nobody cares. Who cares? Yep. It's actually maddening.
Well, it is. And so a lot of our audience that's been with us for a while, we lost a lot of them because we got censored on this specific platform, YouTube. But that happens. I mean, they continuously censor us, and we'll just keep on coming back and tell them to fuck off. But, we have a lot of our audience were left-leaning kind of moderates, centrics, and also liberals. And when 2020 started, a lot of them started questioning the status quo, started looking around and going, what's going on? None of this makes any sense. And I think a lot of people woke up during that time frame. They started seeing things truly as they were, and then it just was reinforced throughout the year because, I mean, obviously you had the George Floyd incident, which I'd like to have your perspective on as well, because, I mean, there's a lot of speculation about that, whether it's filmed or fake or real, or if the protocols were followed or all that stuff. But the riots that pursued afterwards were 100% completely organized and planned prior to the event.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you say that because a lot of people would say endlessly that paid protest is a fabrication from the right. There are people screaming in my face that bragging that I got paid to be here and this and that. We surveilled them, not me specifically, but people in my department surveilled them. They all were put up in the same hotel, which was 2 blocks from the headquarters, and they would come every day. And that, of course, that's just our own experiences, right? And who do you think paid for that? Oh. There are firms. One such, you can type it in right now. It's called Demand Protest, and it's I'll type it up with you so we can kind of read it and share it with your viewers.
So why is that not a crime, Centrist? Why is that not a crime by bringing these people in to do this?
They have deep pockets and they refuse to tell you who the donors are, right? We assemble movements. I mean, look at the imagery on that, right? What are they trying to tell you? When your strategy demands paid protest, go to the services tab.
Rest easy knowing that every detail of your campaign is in the hands of experts. Recruitment, directed action, deniability. Our top priority is preventing any associations back to you. Our operatives only know us, and we have a proven track record of maintaining secrecy. Directed action. We demand action of our operatives on the ground and provide them in-person support, create the scenes that will sway public opinion, perception without any guesswork. By taking every precaution, keeping our clients secret, and only hiring the best individuals, we can ensure that all actions will appear genuine to media and public. What the fudge? Wow.
They don't even hide it, right? It's there it is, as plain as day. So this happens. People deny it happens. It's right there. They're not the only ones. There's many more of these kinds of firms.
If you or I did this, we'd be terrorists.
We'd be in jail. Oh yeah,
this is terrorism 101.
You know what you're doing. You're conspiring to overthrow the government or whatever. Yeah, 100%. And there's Berlin Rosen. Trust me, there are so many of these companies all over the United States, and this is their game.
I wonder who owns this company. Can we find that out?
I haven't looked into their financials.
I can find out.
Oh yeah, if we dig deep, you can find out just about anything. So I'm not sure we could find out exactly who's donating to them, but I'm sure you can just imagine what kind of people are donating.
Yeah.
So they want those protests to look as organic as humanly possible.
Absolutely.
And that's not to say that there weren't actual people just showing up who, kind of bought into whatever narrative and weren't genuine about it. But a lot of that was manufactured, and that's how you do it.
Yep. Yeah. Like for instance, I don't know if you're familiar with stuff that's happened in Rochester, New York. But we had an incident here. It's a really democratic, liberal city, safe haven city, no less. And here we had a case where a man was he was a mentally challenged or mentally disabled person. He was a schizophrenic. He was high on drugs. He had stripped down bare naked, and he was spitting on the police officers. So they put a hood over him. And in the midst of this, he dies of cardiac arrest. And so we had huge riots here, not huge, but we had big protests here and stuff like that. And there were a lot of people that had shown up there. But one of my friends within the agency, one of the agencies said to me, you can tell who the paid people are. Yep. Sure. They're the ones that are flipping tables. They're the ones that are creating the chaos and the mayhem.
The loudest ones with the bullhorns.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now the question is how do you mitigate? How do you make those people not want to come to work?
Specifically the paid ones?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be resolute, right? You have to know, now I'm going to try to talk to my fellow police officers. You have to know that you're being baited, right? That's the whole goal, is to get you so worked up and spun up that you're going to do something stupid on camera. You're going to feed the flames. You're going to douse gasoline on an already smoldering inferno, right? So that's obviously what they want from you. So you need to be resolute, obviously as professional as possible, but don't take any shit, right? If anybody gets in your face, they throw anything at you, you handle business. And that's just the way it is. It's very cut and dry. There's no emotion in it. It's just, this is what happens. And you cut it off right there.
So let's go to George Floyd real quick. So we covered this when it happened. There was a lot of information coming out at that time. Now, the first building that went up in smoke that night was a radio station, right? And the radio station was owned by a woman. Her name was Maria. I forgot her last name. But anyways, she's a member of La Raza. You know what La Raza is? She was the race, right? So she also was part owner in a nightclub. Just so happens that nightclub was a nightclub that Chauvin worked at with George Floyd. They're both security guards there. And it just so happened that her facility was the one that went up in flames that night. the nightclub that they worked at was being under investigation by the feds for money laundering.
Mm-hmm.
And basically laundering money to Somalian terrorist organizations within that local area, and basically moving money in from Venezuela through La Raza, through cartels, through this one nightclub that Chauvin and George Floyd worked at, and then basically to these Somalian terrorist organizations. And that George Floyd was stopped and arrested for what? Utilizing a counterfeit $20 bill because he had been laid off from that nightclub for almost 2 weeks or 2 months because of COVID.
Oh.
So this is the story that we had organized basically when this all happened. And it was, I mean, it's legitimate. Our video is still out there with all the references and everything. So what are your thoughts on what happened? Because I know maybe I don't know if that's a monkey wrench or what, or maybe you knew all that. I don't know. But what are your thoughts on what happened?
Well, I certainly didn't know about the money laundering. I do know Minneapolis has a very sizable Somali population. For whatever reason, it's kind of weird. There's a lot of cold places. Maine has a sizable Somali population. I don't really know why, but I can't speak to that. But it's obviously very possible, and if you've done your research, I certainly trust that. But in terms of the Chauvin Floyd thing, obviously I witnessed the same video that everybody else did.
Right.
Him kneeling on the neck, looked like the carotid artery. Those are really bad optics. And, I'm sure that contributed to his death. Especially when it first happened, I was pretty damn sure I witnessed what was essentially a murder. Obviously, later on, we found out that the medical examiner said, he had enough fentanyl in his system to, kill a horse. Obviously, the full context was shown. The full body cam was released.
And there was actually an Asian officer behind him on helping trying to put cuffs on him behind the car. The angle was a little bit different.
And obviously, you see with that extended version, George Floyd was saying he couldn't breathe way before anybody went hands-on with him, which likely was due to the fentanyl, which was depressing his central nervous system.
Right.
So what killed George Floyd? Was it the fentanyl? Did Chauvin's knee contribute even a little? I can't sit here and say. What I do know is George Floyd was turned into a martyr. Somehow he's been, built up to be some kind of hero. He has obviously an extensive criminal record, and
he wasn't.
Of course, and this isn't to detract from whether. If he was murdered legitimately, obviously he needs justice. End of story. The question is to the degree to which people are willing and ready to accept falsehoods. Okay.
Right.
And that's really the central issue to me. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but was it really murder or is it manslaughter? Because I don't think anybody that's wearing that badge is sitting there thinking, I'm going to kill this guy. I mean, at the end of the day, he's trying to detain him. And if he's guilty of anything, it would be an accidental murder or, an accidental death. I don't necessarily think it's fair to even say that it's murder. So,
and what's going to be really, really scary is there's a couple things to unpack here, right? Can this guy get a fair trial?
No.
Obviously not. It's been pumped across he can't. Everybody in America knows the circumstances. There's no way for anyone not to know. So he's not going to get a fair trial. That's the first thing. But let's suppose, the evidence is pretty overwhelming that it was actually the fentanyl. He was using department approved tactic. So you can't, nail him on that. He was just kind of sitting there. I mean, it's obvious he wasn't intentionally trying to kill him. Yeah. Did he kill him with negligence? Obviously, very, very possible. Very possible. But so what are the two scenarios here? So let's suppose he didn't kill him, right? Or it had no impact. Whatever he did had or no relevance whatsoever. And people are willing to, would you, as a judge or as a jury, do you want your name on that if you were to release him? You're going to be doxxed and probably killed that day, right? And what's the other alternative? That we turn a blind eye to justice to appease a mob because we know what's coming. We know the shit storm.
Well, that's what we've been seeing throughout the last 2 years is they just turn a blind eye and say, we're not, the Supreme Court is the prime example. Not doing it. Don't care.
Do you know what Chief, this is from a fairly reputable source. I can't remember exactly who, but Chief Justice Roberts was overheard in the next room talking to his justices, screaming about,
if they take on the case of Trump, there's going to be riots in the streets, and
there you
can't do that.
Yeah, and so one of his justices, I don't know who,
it was Clarence Thomas.
Clarence Thomas mentioned Bush versus Gore, right? Which pretty much, and so he was saying that obviously for habeas corpus or for stare decisis, right? It's already, if it's been decided, then it pretty much stands for itself. And allegedly, Chief Justice Roberts flipped out and said, these aren't the same fucking circumstances, and you know what this is going to lead to. Pretty interesting. So who's literally, the buck stops with that guy. Right, the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land, and the Chief Justice is the highest justice in the land. And even he is saying, "Hey, if we have to fudge the numbers, to preserve, whatever, we'll do it."
But to see, that shows, and I'm a proud proponent of this, is that the system isn't broken. It's the people within the system are fucking it up and basically breaking the rules and the laws and bending the framework to make it fit for them. And that's a prime example right there. Justice Thomas. I mean, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States of America, and he's sitting there saying everybody knows that he should take this case. It is a 100% constitutional case that he should take, that it should happen, that people wanted it. It doesn't matter if it was only 1 million people that wanted it. He should take it for that fact alone. He represents the Constitution. But he didn't. He worked outside of the system. He worked outside of the rule of law and made a determination based upon fear.
Yep, he didn't want his name on it.
He didn't want his name on it. That's right. Most likely because he knew it would come out if he did, because there's probably some blackmail evidence on him that would put him in some awkward positions. But that's a story for another day, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you can point to 50 other things that are just like it, and how we're being compromised and how we allow ourselves to be compromised. And, one of the things I talk about in my manifesto is this silent majority. And, I'm inclined to agree that there actually is a silent majority. I think the voting showed. I think when you look on YouTube and you see the like to dislike ratio, I think you see the actual heartbeat of America, right?
Right.
But the problem is the loudest voices, they're the cream that rises to the top. And everybody knows the most shrill voices are the ones that drown everybody else out. And the silent majority, they can't be silent anymore. It's too late. The stakes are way too high. If this continues, and I know why it's happening, right? People, as long as they're comfortable and they still get to have, their nice home with their heat on, and they get to prop their feet up and watch their, Monday Night Football or whatever, even if they agree with you staunchly, it's not going to move the needle for them.
That's right.
They have to be placed in massive discomfort for them to actually do something.
So one of our good friends, the anonymous internet source that goes by a 17th letter of the alphabet, said, "Only at the precipice, the moment of destruction, will people begin to change."
Yeah. And sadly, that's probably the way it's going to play out. I hope to God that's why I'm doing this. And I'm certain that's why you're doing this, is to wake people up from a malignant apathy. Because when the time, there is a point of no return, right? And I don't know where exactly that line is, but it's got to be getting pretty freaking close. And, you got to start making moves right now, or you're going to lose your republic.
Yep. I agree. And so let me kind of give you an idea. What we do is we look at the narrative. We kind of look at the historical narrative of what's been laying out and how things are moving and what is currently happening today. Now, one thing that we've said in the sense is Trump is not done, and I don't believe that Trump is done. He's still moving forward. He's still calling it out as it is, as they stole this fucking election from me, right? But here's the thing: is any time since November the now, exactly what would have happened again. Is if he goes on Twitter, he goes on Facebook, he goes into any platform developed and managed by the deep state or by big tech, he gets shut down. Same thing with everybody who follows him, 100 million disenfranchised voters. So this is, if you remember back in September, October, November timeframe, there was the rumors of Wiener's laptop, the content's being released, and there was rumors of Hunter Biden's laptop, which had worse content, and that content being released. And every time that they went out there and proposed that it was going to get released, multiple people would be purged from social media, things would be shut down, Parler gets hacked, all these different things happen. And so what they learned, and this is what we learned in the sense of cybersecurity, I used to be a chief operating officer of a cybersecurity company, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, is what you learn from the data analytics is that there was no methodology of dissemination of that level of information if it happened then. Even so, if Trump fought the deep state on election fraud during the time from November 3rd on to January 20th, nothing would have happened. And the reason nothing would have happened is because it would have been squashed like a bug by big tech. Every conservative, every moderate, anybody who came out in support of it would have been just crushed, deleted, done. And liberals would have been like, see, it's nothing. It's a nothing burger. Just more cases dismissed. Because that's how the media plays the narrative. But what we do have happening, as I said, watch. What's going to happen is a platform's going to get developed. When this platform gets developed, you're going to have mass adoption. Mass adoption is about 100 million people. When this happens, and it can't be shut down by big tech, it can't be controlled by big tech, it can't be manipulated by big tech, okay? This is when that information is going to begin to drop, when that information will start to flow and disseminate out. At that point in time is when it will go viral globally and people will start to wake up en masse. This is what I call awakening. Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, right, just came out this week and said, we are launching our new social network and streaming app, YouTube Twitter replacement, here in the next few weeks. Donald Trump said many months ago, he goes, I'm in talks and negotiations to get onto a new social network. To the day, that has not happened yet. He's going to go on to Mike Lindell's network. Along with it, 80 to 90 to 100 million voters who voted for him will come on as well. And when that moment happens and you have that mass adoption of about 100 million people on that social network, game on. Because now you have a mass awakening. You can show the true power and the number of the silent majority.
Yeah. Well, and to speak to that point, we're going to have to really start looking at what it means, what the First Amendment actually means, right? Because usually when it was written, it was to curtail the government's intrusion. But how far does the government extend, right? When we're talking about these deep state corporate interests that are backing, right? I mean, that's kind of why there were antitrust law to begin with, because you had forces so large and had with such a large bankroll that they can basically control government. So we're going to have to really start having a conversation about what an infringement upon the First Amendment really is, because as you said, they do it all the time. I'm sure they do it to you. They do these bans. They do shadow bans. They just outright censor things. They destroy platforms. I mean, and they're not very subtle about it. They try to deny it, but you can't deny it. It's so obvious that it's going on.
Well, see, the court
Yeah.
case for that had already been settled. The FEC back in the 1990s declared wireless airwaves, any information that is trafficked over wireless airwaves, as public domain public information. And therefore, any information transmitted over the airwaves under wireless networks is public domain and therefore protected by the First Amendment right. This is what John Perry.
Do you know what case that is offhand?
I don't know. I can look it up and get it to you, but it was the FEC.
Well, you said 90s.
I think it was the late 90s, early 2000s, and they declared that any wireless transmission, because this came about through an Espionage Act, basically is people were picking up cell signals and recording conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying, oh, you can't do that. They said, actually, we can. It's public domain information. And so it's when these social platforms go to censor you, they're saying that you're violating their community guidelines, that you're violating their terms of service. It's a private network. It's a private community. When in actuality, it's not. It's an integral part of society pertaining to today. And that's the one thing is, the First Amendment, the Founding Fathers were incredibly intelligent when they wrote the Bill of Rights, the first through the 10th Amendment. They knew exactly what they were doing. They wrote it with precedence in the sense of one has proper authority over the other. And it never meant to get past the first two amendments, right? Is once they infringe on the First Amendment, you go immediately to the Second Amendment, it's over. But with the First Amendment is, the Constitution is literally means contract, a contract between you and the government of your God-given rights that they cannot infringe upon. And so the First Amendment was established in the sense where I can express myself religiously, philosophically, anything I want, as long as I do not impede on Jason's freedoms of the same. So I can't forcefully make Jason believe or say what I want to think and believe.
Right.
Right? And the government has overstepped their boundary radically. Free speech zones, limiting protest areas, the rights to redress your government for grievances. But one thing that people fail to understand is that the Constitution isn't the only legal document in the United States of America. Mm-hmm. The Declaration of Independence is the founding legal document of this country. And in the Declaration of Independence, it basically states the rights of the people to remove any government that becomes radical or destructive to the means.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said that we should do a campaign to recall Joe Biden, and it's kind of got a little traction, but didn't. And people said, well, you can't recall a president. You can't recall a congressman. I said, yes, you can. They said, no, you can't. There's nothing in the law that says you can. I go, well, laws don't tell you what you can do. Laws tell you what you can't do. They said, well, there's nothing in the Constitution that says you can. I go, well, there is in the Declaration of Independence. And it's actually expressed within the Constitution, and that is reserved. And so it is the right of the people to remove any government that becomes destructive to the means. That's in the Declaration of Independence. That is the right of the people. The people are represented by multiple forms of checks and balances. We have the federal level of checks and balances, right? The three systems right there. But our great founders, they built a republic, and the republic has multi-points of failure. And so the other level of checks and balances is the court system. Well, obviously that's corrupted. The jury system. The jury system used to be jury of your peers. Literally meant a jury of your peers, not jury of strangers. So that was corrupted. But then we have this, is we have the 10th Amendment, is that all laws not inherent within the first 10 amendments are reserved for the states or the people respectively. Which means that declaration within the Declaration of Independence that says that the people have the right to basically remove a destructive government is reserved for the 10th Amendment. And the states can call a constitutional convention, which right now 38 states are red states, and they can remove a sitting president, they can remove any elected official through right of caucus. And if they don't do it, then it is the right of the people respectively to do it.
Yeah. The 10th Amendment is so... I don't know, for whatever reason, it is not talked about. It is not discussed enough.
Because that's why it's scary.
It is one of the most integral. It's what so you don't like the way things are going in California, so you move and you go to Idaho or Texas or wherever, and that's literally one of the reasons why. That's what they call the United States, right? So. Yeah. Any standard not specifically cased in the U.S. Constitution is left to the states to decide on their own. And yeah, I totally agree, and I think that's one of the things that needs to get out there, because there is this idea of, federal and state, and there are federal laws and there are state laws, but there's kind of this misconception that federal law always trumps state law, and that's just not the case.
Not the case. Only in two scenarios: interstate commerce and international export import.
Right, because it's specifically addressed. Yep. That's right.
Addressed in the Constitution specifically.
Well, and some of the interesting things, these were hashed about early on, before even the framing of the Constitution, right? The Federalists and the Anti-Federalists would argue, peaceably though, right? They would say, no, the Articles of Confederation just had no teeth, and Anti-Federalists would say, well, if you give too much locus of power to the federal government, we're just going to end up right back where we were, right? So, and they went over this endlessly, and I think the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers are very relevant today. I think more people should read it. And kind of one of the interesting things, obviously I go by Centra Servant. It's a pseudonym. Mm-hmm. Back then, they were doing the same things. Cato, Brutus, Sentinel, Federal Farmer, Agrippa, Publius, the state soldier. All of these people were hashing. Anonymously discussing these things. That's kind of what I want to do. That's kind of where I want this to go. Yes. And not just with police officers, but
so where do you see this heading then? And I want to know your honest opinion is, what do you see coming up 6 to 12 months? What is your idea? What is your perspective?
I'm sure it's going to get worse before it gets better, or at least they're going to try. Whether COVID was manufactured or whether it was just used conveniently, in any event, we see what happened, right? Yeah. They used it to their benefit to suppress, and they used it to their advantage. So who knows? Are we going to see a resurgence? Are we going to see some crazy mutation where now it's like on par with Ebola? Mm-hmm. And if you leave your house, you're dead. You're going to get a flatline. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen with this trial? If it goes the way that the media doesn't want it to go, it's going to be absolute. Whatever we saw this summer or last summer, it's going to be child's play.
Yep, I agree.
So, but I don't know. Maybe people will wake up. Maybe people will be inspired, and they'll say, "Yeah, fuck this shit. I'm done. I'm not playing these games anymore. We've been strained to the max. This means too much."
Yeah. Now, what do you think happens when that scenario plays out? Let's say that this summer happens and the protests flame up 10x of last year. Cities are in turmoil. Police departments can't handle the strain. You have paid protests everywhere. George Soros is throwing money around like a bachelor at the Playboy Bunny House, right? And the people just say that's enough. What's your perspective from the police department, from a police officer on that level?
The degree to which police departments have been infiltrated, because they have, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of the things that I discuss in this manifesto is that, just because someone's a police officer, I'm not on that, thin blue line bullshit, there's a degree to it, right? There's chiefs of police. They have that job with a price tag, right? So they're going to tell all their officers to do something or not do something. at some point, the police are going to get fed up. At some point, the people are going to get fed up. And you don't need to know anything else other than look at ammo. Look at ammo right now. Look at the shortage. Look what everybody's terrified by.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that really speaks to the level that people know what's going on. It's just a matter of what's the spark. What's the spark that it's going to take? It's hard to say, but I need to believe that there's enough people see what's going on. They're getting pissed off, and they're going to have a breaking point.
Jake, go ahead.
So real quick, towards the end of your manifesto, you say, to be honest, I have so many concepts and ideas, I cannot possibly flesh them all out here.
Yeah.
I want to gauge the reception of this, which I hope will be a first installment of more to come.
Yes.
So should we see some more to come?
Yeah. So when this was dropped, this was about 2 weeks of just furious typing and just my brain just dumping everything out. And there was a specific timeline, and obviously that was the election, because I knew if Trump was won or, was legitimized as the winner, I should say, it was going to be really bad. Mm-hmm. And everything was going to get drowned out that I was saying. I think everything did get drowned out anyway. Or I think my approach was incorrect or could have been better. In any event, for a while, I just kind of checked out because I got no response. And I was like, okay. I mean, I put a lot into this, and no return. And honestly, this is the first, hopefully one of many, podcasts that I've been on. I'm hoping to get some more traction. In any event, I've gotten kind of a new breath of fresh air. I've decided to start a blog /vlog to talk about different topics continuously. And I have plans. I can't divulge too much about how I'm going to go about it, but I'm going to have a system to discuss with different police officers. And if I didn't explain it to your viewers, the reason for the anonymity is twofold here. One, it's not about me. It's obviously about the message. But it's also, this could be misconstrued by my own department as insubordination, or me speaking out of turn, or me politicizing something, when in reality, this is me speaking off duty. It has nothing to do with my government identity. Okay. And I have honestly a right to free speech. So I can say whatever the hell I want, when I want, off duty. Yep. But obviously the most important reason is I would be doxxed, and they would try to send Antifa to my house, and there would be a lot of bodies lying in my lawn, and I want to avoid that.
Yeah, I hear you on that.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, is anybody you worked with or anybody that you used to work with contacted you and been like, dude, you got to read this?
Oh, what do you mean? Like as if I have two people on the inside that I work with. Obviously, the more people I work with, the more I run a risk, right?
Absolutely.
And so I trust these two highly to keep my secret. I have other people that are propagating it in different ways.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm on the radar yet. Eventually I will be. And I, as I spoke to Josh a few days ago over the phone, I have no illusions that I can remain anonymous forever. I'm aware of how much of a reach that big tech has, and if somebody really, really wants to get you, they're going to get you.
That's right.
Yep.
But I'm hoping my anonymity I'll have by a little bit of time. And then slowly I build a little bit more credibility, build a bigger base, and then it becomes obvious that I'm just being fucked with, right? And so I have recourse. I
Trust
have
me,
a lot of people.
could already tell you all about that.
Yeah. And then I have a big backing and say, nope, we see what's going on and here's how we can prove it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hoping.
Cool. Well, we're going to definitely have to have you back on, and you're more than welcome to join our community anytime. We'll talk to you about that here later on and see what we can maybe work out with you, because I'd love to have you on and maybe even on a different podcast and discuss the Federalist Paper, discuss the Founding Fathers, discuss that whole conceptualization, because that's one of my favorite topics to actually talk about is U.S. history, American history.
Same.
And so thanks so much for joining us tonight, Centrist Servant. Jason, thank you so much. Thanks to everybody. Don't forget to follow us. Go on over there, socialredpill.com. Completely free to join. Linked up in the description box below is Centrist Servant's website. It's www.centristservant. You can find that linked up right there. And then he has a downloadable copy of his manifesto right there. I'm pretty sure we'll be seeing him in a week or so back on this show. But I'm just saying. Good night. God bless everybody. We'll take care, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Josh, Jason, take care.